All right. Hello and welcome to Cuyahoga Arts and Culture's 2023 Cultural Heritage Panel. I'm Julia and I'm here with fellow staff Jania, who's our co-chair, Jill Paulson, our executive director, as well as Jake, India, Laura, Jill, and Meg, who are behind the scenes. For audiences who are joining us online, you can find the captioning by clicking the live transcription button at the bottom of your page. Thank you to our panelists for serving on our interactive public panel, learning about our process, our applicants, and our funding criteria. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the local public funder for arts and culture in Cuyahoga County. Our mission is to inspire and strengthen the community by investing in arts and culture. The goal of the Cultural Heritage Grant is to promote public access and breadth of arts and cultural programming for cultural heritage organizations in Cuyahoga County. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that the land that we stand on and the place we call Cuyahoga County is land that was claimed by the United States government through force, displacement, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. We thank the Lake Erie Native American Council for providing us the information to develop this land acknowledgement. We also want to take a moment to lift up CAC's value of equity. We choose to lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequities is embedded into government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential that organizations who produce arts and cultural programming have as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued. We encourage arts organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in your own work. And you can visit cacgrants.org/equity to learn more. And so before we get started, I'd like to introduce our executive director, Jill Paulson, with some words for our panelists and applicants.
Sure. Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you to everyone both watching in line, online and those 4 of you who have taken the extra time out of your week to serve as panelists today. This is the 3rd day that we've done panel, and it's, I think, a really exciting panel to end off this work on. My comments today are really short because what I just want to reiterate is some of what Julia has said and her co-chair Jania in our pre-remarks, but the panel is really important to CAC because it's a way that we can do our work transparently, in the open, publicly, for the residents of Cuyahoga County to see, and for the applicants that we serve, the groups and nonprofits we serve, that they can see how things are done. So thank you for being part of this open and transparent process. I also now want to thank my teammates at CAC who have been doing this work for over a year to get us here today, right from the development of the policies, the creation of this grant program, which is, I think, a really important step for our organization and vital for this community. And then through the many hours of technical assistance that they offer to organizations across both project support and cultural heritage. And now here we are today chairing this panel, albeit short and sweet, a very important one. So thank you to you all. And then thanks once again to the panelists. You really are the extension of this team, but real experts in the field. And I think it will be a really positive experience here in these next few minutes as we learn and hear from you as you review the application before us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Julia to do the next steps, but just know, please and thank you for all of your time. I'm going to log off and watch from afar, but again, I'm excited that you're here and grateful for your expertise and energy. Thanks.
Thank you, Jill. So at this point, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. I just dropped an order into the chat. So if you can please plan to share your name and gender pronouns, where you're located, and your professional connection to arts and culture.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Centeno. I go by she, her. I am located in San Diego, California. I currently am the Director of Education and Engagement at the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego. I've been there for a year. And prior to working there, I worked for the City of San Diego's Commission for Arts and Culture, where I was a grant maker, leading similar grants as the one that we just reviewed. So thank you all for having me. And that's it. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Asif Majid here. Normally, I'm based in Hartford, Connecticut, which is Tungstis land. Today, I actually am in San Diego. So how about that? Carla, we should talk. I am an independent artist. I use he, him, his pronouns. And I also, in addition to being an independent artist, teach theater and human rights at the University of Connecticut. Happy to be here.
I'm LaShonda Crowstorm, based in Indianapolis, Indiana, home of also the Potawatomi and the Miami Nations and Shawnee. I use she, her pronouns. I have multiple layers how I'm connected to the arts. I teach in a Master's of Social Practice program. I also run a program in an organization that uses the arts, humanities, and religion as a vehicle for creating spaces for community transformation, where I run a program called Powerful Conversations on Race, where we actually use the arts as a vehicle to help communities have really difficult conversations on race every month since 2017. As a social practice artist, my work itself is rooted in understanding the history of racial violence in the United States, working with communities across the country to use quilting and other techniques to circle up together to talk about these hard histories and how do we heal from them and transform our communities moving forward. Thank you. Proud to be here today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Carlin. My pronouns are he, him. I'm in the United Kingdom, just about 2.5 hours to the northeast of London. I've lived here for about a year. Prior to that, my career was in the States, working with Contemporary Art and Performance Festival, working with theater companies, culturally specific organizations, and other arts and cultural organizations throughout the United States. I am currently a senior consultant for TRG Arts, and I work with a handful of organizations of all shapes and sizes, both here in the UK and in North America as well. So really grateful to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So now I'm going to walk through how the review process will work for those following along on the live stream. As the panel chair, I'll introduce the applicant in just a minute. Then we'll lead the panel through a discussion focusing on each of our 3 funding criteria one at a time. So panelists will be invited to comment on the application in relation to the criteria for public benefit, artistic and cultural vibrancy, and organizational capacity. We'll have about 5 minutes for each. Our panel co-chair, Jania, will keep us on track with time using the PowerPoint on the screen, which will show which criteria we're on. So to keep things moving smoothly, panelists can plan to come off mute to indicate that they would like to speak next. If need be, I'll call on a panelist, but you guys are welcome to jump in if you have a comment to share. After we go through the criteria, the panelists will submit their scores, which are then tabulated by CAC staff. So you may have noticed that there's only one application this year, and I do want to note that the reason is that the current cohort of cultural heritage grantees, that's 11 organizations, have been pre-approved by CAC for 2023 grants already. So they did not need to apply this year. To our applicants, please do not contact or address the panel in any manner during deliberations, electronically or otherwise. If an applicant believes that a panelist has presented incorrect information regarding their application, they should complete the information correction form, which is available at cacgrants.org/live and within the audience guide. CAC staff will review the form to determine if it's an objective correction of misinformation. And if it is, the panel chair will read that to the panel and for the public. So an example of this would be a panelist misstating the number of performances listed in an application. This is an opportunity to clarify what was submitted and not provide additional information. After the panel is complete, audience members are encouraged to participate in the public comment session by submitting comments via our online form which is also at cacgrants.org/live. And the deadline to submit comments is the conclusion of deliberations today. Applications, scores, and panel comments are not discussed at that time. So with that, we will get started with our first and only review, which is of Buckout Cleveland. So the mission of Buckout Cleveland is to utilize dance to successfully bridge the gap between Northeast Ohio youth and higher education at historically Black colleges and universities, while increasing the awareness of obtainable dance careers. Buckout Cleveland specializes in teaching HBCU dance line style of dance, commonly known as dance majorette. This dance style is specifically performed by marching band auxiliary members at historically Black colleges and universities. This dance style is a combination of high energy gymnastics, hip hop, jazz, and ballet. For dancers that are old enough, Buckout offers audition preparation for selection onto the dance teams associated with these schools and dance teams. So would someone like to get us started around how this application relates to the public benefit criterion, which is an organization's ability to meaningfully and authentically engage its community to achieve its mission?
I can begin. For me, on the public benefit criteria, Buckout was in the mid part of the strong category. I found that they have an exceptional connection to the community that's being served, particularly in terms of linking young Black dancers to the possibility of dance careers and attending HBCUs and continuing the strong Black dance tradition in these schools. They also had a very strong and clear definition of what this community was, particularly articulating ages 9 to 19 as kind of the prime area of intervention here. It clearly seemed to me that they were sharing power with dancers in a way that allowed them to drive artistic choices, as was the case with one of their support materials, the Freedom video, which went viral. A curiosity that I have, which is why they weren't kind of further along in the strong category or into the exceptional category, is I was curious about how and what sort of like set of resources are specifically being connected to the dancers in terms of making sure that they gain admission into these HBCUs, which are highly competitive. So things like college counselors, visits to relevant campuses, support with financial aid or writing admissions essays, I think in terms of wraparound programming might have been something that would kind of integrate that part of the mission a bit more. For me, but nonetheless, I thought it seemed that there were diverse types of classes being offered to youth at rec centers, out of school time, elementary, middle schools, trauma-informed care programming. I was a little curious about what that particular phrase meant in the application, the idea of trauma-informed care programming, and would love to know more about that. And it seemed very clear that the founder was attempting and working to center the work of youth and creating a space in which to share power with them. So for me, for those reasons, they were in the strong category on this criteria.
I'll piggyback. I think you said a lot of things I was thinking. I think it was also important to highlight an aspect of African American culture that doesn't get a lot of attention, and that you're really rooted in connecting not just the art form, but actually there's a full-bodied thought process about how do we create space for students to use their arts to go to school, and then a career after that. And I think a lot of times when we look at the arts, there is a thought process when youth enter that they really can move forward and have a life that is in the arts. Especially coming from the African American community, you don't send your kids to college to be artists. That's just not how this works. That's not the way up. So I think I really give you a lot of kudos for not only centering the culture of these youth, but an art form that also doesn't get a lot of attention and respect, but also showing youth that there actually is a path forward for you when the zeitgeist of your own culture says this is not the way to go. Living in America itself, centering the beauty and things of Black women is not something that ever happened. So I also give you a further, I love that I saw a lot of different body shapes in the work, because also oftentimes those bodies are not celebrated. So here's the place where I love that you're unapologetically Black and unapologetically celebrating Black women in spaces where that does not happen. I really, really love the fact that you share power. I am a youth advocate and a huge youth worker. So the fact that the youth are so present in the work, from recruitment, which from my viewpoint is actually how the work has expanded. It hasn't been around the work of the adults. It's actually been around the work of the youth, going to get other youth to come in and see that, no, here is a different way forward for us as young creatives. And that in the face of all the trauma associated with the racial justice work and that has happened in the years with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and we could just go on and on and on. And with you being in Cleveland and the trauma of Tamir Rice themselves, which I'm assuming that some of these youth were probably that age when he was killed at 12, that you have created a space for their voice to be uplifted and that you listened. And that doesn't always happen in spaces with youth, that oftentimes it's very top down. It's not a partnership, a true partnership with the individuals that are being serviced in the work. I do like that you have the trauma and cared informed parts associated with this. And I would also just encourage you to look at some of the work around race-based trauma that is specifically focused around working with youth and their families, with dealing with a lot of the things that youth in this generation are dealing with. And I'll share all those resources with Julia, and she can forward that to you. So loved it. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I wish my city had it too, but keep moving forward. Thank you.
I would just like to echo all of the comments that came before me speaking. I definitely rated this on the strong side. I think when we think about public benefit, it's this idea of meaningfully and authentically engaging with the community. And I think that really starts with the executive director being so integrated in the community, and also it kind of stemming from a social art practice, which that it's the root of the program, which then kind of feeds into everything that it does. So I felt that the connection was very strong, and that the public benefit was very evident, both in the source material provided as work samples, but also integrated into the narrative and all of the other documents. There is one comment, which is in the describe how your organization reaches out to wider public. There is a lot of emphasis on social media and kind of the digital content that is shared. And there's also a comment that says student dancers and their parents also have word of mouth and community engagement efforts. And I think I would just like to know a little bit more what that community engagement efforts are. But either way, I still, there's still so much evidence there that the word is being spread, and that the good work is happening. The last thing that I would say is, actually, I think that's it. It's just that there's this clear evidence of knowledge and intimacy and connection to the community. So I commend you for the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, yes, and to everything that's been said. I also rated this strong. I feel like there was strong evidence for all the reasons that have already been described. The one that maybe hasn't been mentioned yet that I would throw out there that I found in my review is I found that there was very strong evidence that the project, that the program was accessible and inviting to the public, to the community, through a combination of cost-based programs, free-based programs, and then making the work of the organization, visible to the wider public through lots of different platforms throughout the community. So I would add that to the list of strong evidence that's been given by my peers.
Great, thank you all. We will move on to the Artistic and Cultural Vibrancy Criterion, which is an organization's ability to create quality work that inspires and challenges its community.
I can just start. I saw a lot of evidence of the organization's ability to create quality mission-driven work. I think that is evident throughout the narrative, but also the work samples, which were very strong. And especially the video interview, I felt really painted a picture of the work that's being done and how it serves, how the organization serves the community quite well. The only thing that I noticed was that the strategic plan, which was really well thought out and comprehensive, I didn't see too much evidence there, like identifying, defining, or mentioning engagement strategies. And maybe that's not the place for the strategic plan, but that was the only kind of thing to know. Either way, the organization scored really high or strong in this area for me.
Yeah, ditto. They were actually in the exceptional category for me on this one. And one of the main reasons was, I think this is something that LaShonda had mentioned previously, but the idea of kind of clear tiered opportunities for students to graduate through the different levels of what the organization has to offer, right? Knowing that there's kind of a pathway for arts and culture moving from just being kind of what you're doing kind of on the side or maybe as an out of school time thing all the way up to and through a career. And I think the placement of the founder in a professional dance context also really helps with that, and really understanding and knowing that she's using her knowledge to kind of bridge those worlds is pretty great. And yeah, I think I'm trying to see if I have anything else. The last thing is that the strategic plan for me also demonstrated a willingness to expand programming through renewing the partnership with the city of Cleveland, and future plans for online courses, for more online courses, which I think is great.
Yeah, not a lot to add from my end either. Also scored this in the exceptional category. I felt the evidence was overwhelming. There's clearly diverse professionals providing capacity building for the sector, demonstrating rewarding careers and creating a place for rewarding careers. And there was clear evidence of partnerships across sectors and really strong, authentic collaborations with universities and cities and departments and community centers and schools and. So really exceptional evidence, in my opinion, of artistic and cultural vibrancy. Oh, you're on mute, LaShonda.
Oh,
Say again.
I'm sorry. I think I would just say keep it going. I think I said everything about the importance of the work artistically in the community in the first long comment. So there is your artistic vibrancy in that I scored this in the exceptional category. Thank you.
Any last notes around artistic and cultural vibrancy? Okay. We will move on to the final criterion, which is organizational capacity. This is an organization's ability to successfully manage resources to their best use now and for years to come.
I'll go. So huge percentage changes to total earned revenue. There's a big increase in the operating expenses, personal expenses, as well as, with that comes the reach and the impact. And so that was really wonderful to see that the organization is moving forward and has a trajectory. Also in the strategic plan, there was so much discussion about capacity building in terms of board, which obviously helps support the organization's organizational capacity. Also, like, I was so pleased to see mention of higher payroll and benefits, as well as wanting to support the staff and grow the contract, what is it called? The people that they contract out. Like, all of that to me shows sustainability, future thinking, foresight, and wanting to grow the staff more than anything, which an organization like this, we want to see, continue to grow and have support. Is there any, the only thing I noticed is that it says that the staff was volunteer in the narrative, but then the FY 2020, it states that there was about $2,000 for W-2 salaries, benefit, and payroll. So there was a little bit of a discrepancy there, but not enough to like raise a red flag or anything like that. I scored this organization exceptional in this area.
I will go as long as you can hear me, aside from the plane that's flying overhead. This was also for me on organizational capacity in the upper part of the strong category for me. Again, really appreciated the strategic plan. I thought that was a really smart thing to include, and would encourage actually future applicants to do such a thing if they don't have one already, because I think that really, in this case, had very clear sort of progress markers. They were measurable, and they were attainable, and timely, and all the rest of those SMART goal lovely things, those SMARTY goal lovely things that we do. Also appreciated kind of the desire to expand out and have more board members, integrating CPA, cinematographer, videographer. These are great things to see. The attention to broadening the funding base in the future demonstrated a lot of thoughtfulness, as Carla said, around organizational sustainability and growth. One question that I had was, I was a little bit surprised somewhat, or at least it was a curiosity, that there was no board approved DEI policy or statement, which was one of the sort of like yes, no questions that needed to be answered. And I'm curious about that and what that means. Obviously, this is, baked into the organization's work. And also there is something to be said for thinking about what does it mean to institutionalize something at board level beyond just what is happening in kind of the organization's mission. But otherwise, for me, upper part of the strong category on organizational capacity.
I rated organizational capacity in the good category. I felt the evidence was sufficient. I have no concerns whatsoever that the organization will be able to manage its resources well and deliver on the programs and services that it describes, and all of those things. And actually, my comments about the good rating here are double-edged in a way that the strategic plan is full of enormous ambition. And it's moving in a lot of different directions: geographic expansion of some programs, adding lots of professional staff, looking at venue rentals and venue hires, and looking at acquiring pretty significant assets in terms of transportation opportunities. There's a lot of really big, complex ambition baked into a really short, a strategic plan that has a relatively short timeline there. So while I totally agree with my panelists that, and Asif in particular, that including the strategic plan was clearly very thoughtful, what would have been helpful for me to provide additional evidence of and provide additional confidence in the organization would have been to provide some of those updates, some of the learnings and the progress on the strategic plan, some of the dates in the strategic plan from 2021, and elements to say, great, that's what we wanted to do in 2021, but letting me know how are some of those initiatives progressing? What have we learned so far? What's moving forward? What's maybe taking a back seat? As with any strategic plan, you put it out on paper and you put it into practice, and all of a sudden it needs to change, and you learn and you make adjustments as you go. So I think providing some evidence in future as to how your strategic plans are evolving, what's working, what you're learning from them will enhance the already good evidence that the organization is capable of managing resources, public resources well. There's really admirable ambition here, and obviously an opportunity to grow and expand. And with that, just often generates as many questions as it does answers. So I applaud the instinct and the desire to grow and expand, and yet making sure that when we share some of those ambitions, that the more we can put behind it to explain where and how and why and what's the business case for some of the decisions, and why we might prioritize some elements of our business over others can add additional context and support. But overall, sufficient, good, overall very strong application, clearly not concerned about organizational capacity.
I would just like to add, I think I agree with you. Some evidence would have been, kind of reflection points, right? I think that's what I kind of noted was the word reflection on the strategic plan. Although I felt confident regardless of if it was included or not, just because I feel as though the data arts report paints a picture of like diversification of funds, of increase in audience, of all of this. So it was easy for me to kind of paint a picture of trajectory with kind of the background history and the growth. But I agree. I think some, like for the future, some kind of integration of where we are and where we'd like to be would be good. But I didn't view that as a it didn't stop me from, kind of painting the picture myself, I guess.
So I'll kind of piggyback everyone. My questions are actually a little different because you are growing like massively fast, and I love that, but that can also kind of push you off the cliff if there aren't some internal infrastructure that's thought about. And so some of the things that I really looked at is like, what is the type of board training that's going to happen? What does that capacity building look like? Cuyahoga Arts and Culture has the groundwater to anti-racism training. I would suggest that one policy may be that everyone has that coming in, so that when you think about how do you create a DEI mission, it's rooted in some of the values you're already thinking about. I would also like, for me, because you're growing rapidly and the way your funding's different and you're looking for different avenues, that there are different models that are not attached to what has currently been considered, which we know a lot of those current fundraising models are going out the door for a variety of reasons. But looking at some of the things through the community-centric fundraising methodology, looking at different, you're at that point where this is the point to almost slow down. And it's not about executing the strategic plan from my view, because you're going to get there. It's about thinking about how do we do that work moving forward, because you're at an important, crucial point where as you lay that foundation, you have to think about it now, because if you start rooting other things that maybe are attached to these top-down models, these other models that nonprofits are beginning to move away from, that it'll be harder to switch in the past. So even thinking about what does it mean to have a flattened out leadership, that you have like maybe co-directorship positions, that really spending some time in the next years or so looking at what are alternative ways of fundraising that aren't some of the traditional methods, because they're not working. And that's why people are moving away from them. That looking at other models of how do performing arts organizations think about leadership, because there are some folks who are just in charge of the dance. It's the artistic person, director, and then there's a person over here. So really at this crucial moment of institution building, because I see you not in expansion mode, you're in institution building mode, that you have to really kind of take a step back and be like, what is the institution we're building for the long haul? And it's not just about the sponsors, it's or the, if we get transportation, because a lot of those things are caught up in how do we provide social services, which is cool, but what does that mean as an arts organization that's expanding, that you're also addressing the trauma and things, which I think is important. So for me, that the board training, like how do you look at your models of fundraising? How do you look at your models of leadership? That this is the point to really start looking at that. And the final thing is, I did not see an actual, I'm losing the word here. I typed it in, but I didn't see a succession plan written in. Like things are growing rapidly, but they're growing rapidly because of one person. What happens if we have to switch leadership? Do we have a model of how to do that written into the work? So those are my final comments. Thank you.
Thank you, LaShonda. So that concludes our first and last review for the session. I'll ask my colleagues to look and see if there's any correction forms that I need to share. But while we're doing that, I do want to give the panelists a chance to make, any last comments or statements generally to our applicant or to future cultural heritage applicants. And I'll let Asif get started.
Yeah, thanks. This was fun. I kind of wish we had more applications to review. I would have loved to kind of like work more with this panel. Y'all seem really great. I'm happy to do this. Thank you, CAC, for kind of putting this together, of course, and inviting me and the rest of us for the opportunity and giving us the opportunity to collaborate on this. I think yeah, I think for me, just, if we broaden out maybe some of the things that folks have been talking about is I was on the project support panel yesterday, and one thing that I said there that I'd like to repeat here is that when we think about the way that DEI work integrates into organizational mission and organizational capacity and public programming and all the rest of this, it's really important to recognize where we're at in the journey, right? And everybody's got the journey to do in different ways, right? Whether it's primarily white organization, whether it's an organization like Buck Out Cleveland that is supporting students, young Black women to get primarily to get into HBCUs, right? There's work to be done at all levels. And so I think what's really important is to make sure that that reflective process is embedded in how we're kind of moving organizations forward and how we're thinking about kind of exactly as LaShonda was talking about around sort of, what is the board training? What are their kind of like, perspectives that are coming into it? And I think sometimes from the position of being a BIPOC community, sometimes we assume that our lived experience equates to knowing how to do this in an organizational way. And that's not necessarily always true. And so I think thinking about those two kind of pieces together is a really important aspect of this work. But I just wanted to say again, I think this applicant did a really great job, and I would love to kind of see hopefully future applicants doing similar kind of work and keeping it going. I also have to bounce to another meeting.
Thanks so much, Asif.
It's lovely serving
Okay.
with you all.
We'll touch base soon.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, I can go next. It was so wonderful to read this application and to see the work that's being done. It was inspirational, and I felt that everything that the organization provided gave me a lot of, there was a lot of evidence that gave me, what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence in them progressing and continuing to do good work. I agree that I think some kind of reflection or discussion on how they are thinking about their growth, and then thinking about how all of their growth then impacts all of the different aspects of the organization would have been good to integrate, because while the numbers are very impressive, right? We see this like great kind of inflation in their funds and the reach that they have. There's still, with that comes, I think, a point of like, okay, well, what does this mean, and how do we do this in a way that is meaningful and in a way that that allows us to move with the pace that we're moving in. So kind of echoing what my fellow panelists said. So that's my only feedback that I would give, but nevertheless, amazing organization, amazing work. And I'm happy to have read the application.
I don't really have a lot more to offer, because I think they get our notes, right? Because I've typed a lot of stuff in the notes as well, but then just really considering like, what does it mean to grow, and it's okay to slow down a little bit, and know that that's okay, so that you can set in place actually what it is you want it to grow as it continues to grow, because it gets much harder as we go down those paths to start course correcting when we've got dozens of people working, and we've got lots of all the things you talked about, but it's easier now that you're at this inflection point to just be like, okay, what does it mean for us to take like a year and have do some of that work that's rooted in how to have community listening teams, so we can actually hear what community is thinking about our work and how we support community supports us. Because the more embedded you are in community beyond just the dancers themselves, but it looked at as a community institution, that stabilizes your as well as creates other opportunities for you. And it's okay to slow down sometimes and listen to your community and get feedback, not just from the board, but get feedback from those who are impacted by your work, and be willing to do that on occasion. And I would just say one thing, as you build your strategic planning processes, is build in reflection, not just reflection, but actual spaces to course correct. And maybe every year every 18 months, you go back through that whole strategic plan and say, okay, this isn't working, this doesn't work. And then you be willing to restructure it yet again. And that's a much more complicated process, but it is actually one that helps you remain connected to community over the long haul and reflect what's happening.
Just quick punctuation from me is just that of gratitude to Buck Out Cleveland. I've sat on my fair share of grant panels over the years in all different places and contexts, and this is one of the most authentic and energizing and unique organizations I've had the pleasure to learn about. So thank you to your work, and thanks to CAC as well for the creation of this program. I've also had this is not my first rodeo with CAC grant panels over a period of years, and have seen CAC evolve and respond, and the creation of this stream of funding and this program in particular just seems really well suited to respond to and create opportunities for fabulous organizations like Buckout Cleveland. So really just a tip of the hat and appreciation to the community of Cuyahoga County and CAC and the arts and cultural community there, all the good work you all are doing. This is really wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad, LaShonda, Carla. It's really meaningful to have, your comments around the application, the funding criteria, and these extra notes at the end. This is so helpful for us at CAC. And I know that, the grantee, the applicant is listening and taking note as well. So really meaningful to have you guys be a part of this process. That is the end of our panel review. So I will ask that any audience members leave the meeting so that we can close it out and just wrap it up at this point. So thank you so much for being a part of our panel process, and we will close the live stream.